and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Cleric's Knowledge Domain, a class specialization from the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook module. Clerics are one of the core classes within Dungeons & Dragons, and have been there for all, if not most, of the editions Wizards of the Coast has published. With 5th edition, there are a number of class specializations you can choose from, and in this video, we will be going over the Domain of Knowledge. Clerics work a little differently than other classes when it comes to their class specialization, in that clerics don't gain as many base class features, but they gain more features and abilities through their domain than other classes do. Additionally, many of the features gained by the domain will typically complement or increase the effectiveness of many of the base class features. For instance, all clerics gain multiple domain-specific spells that do not need to be clerical in origin, but will be with respect to how they are cast. It is also the domain that fleshes out the Channel Divinity feature and adds capabilities to it that complement the underlying premise of the domain itself. With respect to how I'm going to organize the details of this domain within this video, I'm only going to focus on the levels where something is gained, as the bulk of the changes your cleric will receive that are not domain-specific have already been covered within the various base class videos for the cleric. If you have not yet watched those videos, I will provide links in the description below for you to gain access to them. With that in mind, let's take a look at the domain. Clerics gain their class specialization, or domain, at level 1, and this is due to the way that clerics gain access to their spells. When earlier editions were published, the concept was that clerics would call upon their gods to cast their spells. The gods would then use the cleric's body and soul to channel the spell to its inevitable conclusion, and it was the cleric's prayer, or the act of casting the spell, that allowed that connection to happen. With 5th edition, the gods are generally less involved, but still grant their worshipping clerics the means to cast spells on their behalf. Instead of the clerics themselves being the focal point of the spell, they now use a foci, much like other spellcasters of this particular edition. And it's the foci that acts as the origin point for the spells. How you choose a god for your character to worship is up to you, but in 5th edition, the domain is used as a guidepost through the suggested domains column in each of the tables that list the various gods for various worlds. It doesn't mean you can't select a god whose domain is different than the one you have chosen, but as I indicated in the base class video, if a player selected a god that has no relationship to the domain they have chosen, then there could be, from a role-playing point of view, issues casting some spells. Gods might simply refuse to grant the spell unless it in some way aligns with some other worldly goal that the gods might have in mind, for instance. The knowledge domain itself is one whose clerics work to gather information, gain a deeper understanding of things, and try to figure out how things work or why they exist. They are also heavily involved with inventing new things, by using the sum of their knowledge to create inspirational ideas or gain a better understanding of an issue they are trying to solve, and they might engineer something new in the process. There are a number of gods that also encourage their followers to gather knowledge for some task, or simply so that they can hoard that information for themselves. As clerics gain their class specialization at level 1, I'm going to go ahead and start within the character wizard and create an initial character, bring you back at the time that I'm ready to select a class. So give me a moment, I'll be right back. I've gone ahead and pre-entered all of the stats that I had used in the base class videos, as well as selected the same race so that there is a level of consistency between this particular video as well as the base class videos. I'm going to choose the cleric here, and as soon as I do that, a couple of things are going to happen. One, your proficiencies are going to pop, as well as your clerical specialization or your domain. Before we select the domain, there's something I want to point out about our skill proficiencies. One of the class specialization's features is going to give us double proficiency in 2 skills. Those skills are the Arcana, History, Nature, or Religion skills. We don't get to choose the Arcana or Nature skills from this particular list, but the History and the Religion skills are here. As such, I highly recommend, based on the background that you're going to choose, that you focus on one of these 2, unless you do not intend to gain double proficiency with the History or the Religion skills. Another thing to consider is that your background is also going to go ahead and grant you some of the skills that you're going to gain. And that's an implicit grant, you don't get to choose those. For example, if I select the Sage background, which I probably will for this particular character, I'm going to gain the Arcana and History skills automatically. And because of that, I'm going to want to avoid selecting the History skill right here. What I will do is I'm going to choose Insight and Medicine in this particular case, and then I'm going to go ahead and select our Knowledge domain. And you can see we have a number of features that we're going to be granted. I still have some additional proficiencies to go and select here. And these are the skill proficiencies that we get to choose because of this particular Blessings of the Knowledge feature that we are gaining. In this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and select Nature and Religion as the two features that I'm going to gain there. And with respect to the languages, I'm going to go with Celestial, and I gain it one more. So I'm going to go with Abyssal. Before I move on to the next panel, I just want to clear something up here. These two particular skill proficiencies that we selected here are from this Blessings of the Knowledge feature. So once we go ahead and complete this particular character sheet, we don't have to worry about dealing with the Blessings of Knowledge feature, despite the fact that I will cover it for you. When I was stating that we should avoid these particular features, that was really for this section and this section alone, simply due to the fact that I knew we were going to gain it later. Now I'm going to finish the rest of this character off screen, and then once I'm done, I will bring you back once we have the character committed. At Cleric level 1, your character is going to gain access to two features, one called Knowledge Domain Spells, and another called Blessings of Knowledge. The Domain of Knowledge grants your character access to spells that a cleric might not normally gain access to through the use of their cleric spell table. These spells are meant to complement the selectable spells that your character has access to through that same spell table. And it's these spells that are given to your character, and thus they do not count against your preparation list. And these are the spells that your character is going to gain based on specific levels. And what this means is that your character is going to gain these spells at these specific levels. So when your character reaches 1st level, 3rd level, 5th level, 7th level, and 9th level, and it's in addition to the spell that you get to select from the normal cleric spell table. And the result is, because these particular spells are always going to be prepared, you only have to have an available spell slot to actually cast them. Because of that, what I recommend that you do is create an additional spell group that will be associated with your knowledge domain spells. And thus, you can set them to be prepared, and you've got them organized differently so that you can gain access to them quickly and not have to worry about accidentally removing one if you decided at some point later in time to swap out one of your normal cleric spells. The way this is going to work is as follows. The first is that when you drag and drop this level 1 spell into your character's action sheet here, it's going to automatically get added to this level 1 spells list. What I'm going to do is simply create a new group called Knowledge Domain, if I could spell. I'm going to call it that. As soon as I click out of that area, it's going to move this particular spell up to a new power group, not a spell group, but a power group. With that spell now in its own power group, we need to modify this and set this to a spell group. And as soon as we do that, you'll be able to see that you know what level that particular spell group now is. We are also going to want to ensure that we link this against our character's spellcasting ability, because there's going to be non-clerical spells that are going to get added to this, and it's not always going to be able to figure that out appropriately. We do that by ensuring that this ability entry here is changed to Wisdom. That way, any spell that is added to this particular spell group here, as well as any higher level spells that are dropped into this spell group that will then trigger a larger or higher level spell group to be created, they will all be linked against the Wisdom modifier, because this group is going to be linked against your normal clerical spells. This group here is going to be linked against your domain spells. All we then have to do is drag in our final spell here that we're gaining at this level, and it will automatically go through and link itself into that same power group, or spell group, I should say. I'm going to explain how spellcasting is going to work for your cleric-based character. I'm going to temporarily expand this out so that I have a little bit of access to both the spell slot window here, as well as our spells. When you go and execute a spell, when it comes to your cantrips, that's just simply going to happen because these are things that don't make use of any particular spell slots. And when you cast one of these, all you have to do is simply either target a particular creature and click on this in order to execute that particular attack. So for example, if I target the skeleton and I make an attack here, all I have to do is click it once. It'll make that attack roll. They succeeded, and in this particular case, I don't believe there is half damage. No, there is no half damage when it comes to this. They just simply avoid the damage. Had that hit, then I would have been able to simply click this to apply the damage. I don't need to worry about ticking off any of these spell slots. And pay attention to that, because there's a reason why I said that. When it comes to spells that are higher than your cantrip level, so you're looking at level 1 through level 9 in the case of a cleric, any spell that you cast is going to cost a spell slot. Some spells have the ability to be cast higher. So for instance, this Cure Wounds you can cast it at higher levels. So you can cast it as a level 2 or level 9 spell or your level 1 spell. It doesn't really much matter, and anything in between. So if you're looking to, say, heal yourself, you could simply drag and drop this onto your character, and you would cast that as a level 1 spell. But you'll notice this didn't tick off. And that's because Fantasy Grounds has no way to indicate as to whether you're casting this as a level 1 or higher spell. As the player, it is your responsibility to ensure that you tick that off. And as soon as you tick off all level 1 spells, as well as any other spell slot, you will lose the ability to cast any spells. As long as there are specific levels of spell slots here, you will see that you have the ability to cast a given spell, as long as it's prepared. What do I mean by casting something as a higher level? Well, as I said earlier, you can use a particular spell that supports that capability and make use of a second level spell slot, third level spell slot, or higher in order to cast that spell. When you do that, you gain extra dice roll bonuses generally as part of that casting. How do you do that? What you do is you select the effect icon, hold down the left mouse button, and drag it out. And this is going to load up one of these dice. You can then right-click and add an additional die for every level that you're adding to the spell slot. In our case, we can do up to 3rd level. I'm then going to cast that heal, and it will operate as a 3rd level spell, meaning that I then have to tick off a 3rd level spell slot. When it comes to how you cast a domain-specific spell, it works exactly the same way. The only thing that really differs is that you don't have to prepare that spell in advance. You still execute a particular wisdom saving throw, so you're forcing somebody to go through and have the ability to be commanded by this particular spell, although in this case they succeeded. You would then tick off that spell, regardless as to whether it succeeded or failed. As soon as you cast it, you have to tick off a spell slot. Both of these sets of spell groups are going to require spell slots in order to be useful. Yes, these are always available for you to use, except when you're without a spell slot. That's a key piece of information that I find players tend to forget, is that you must have a spell slot in order to cast any of your domain spells or any of your clerical spells. The only exception to that rule is cantrips, because they don't consume a spell slot. As for the Blessings of Knowledge feature, your character is going to gain 2 new languages that they can learn. There's a catch. We've actually already done that. Under the Abilities tab, when we went through and created our character, we selected 2 languages. I selected Abyssal, and I believe the other one was Celestial. That selection is what was triggered by this particular feature. So we don't have to worry about adding anything. It's already been done. The same thing can also be said about the selection of our skills here. However, there is something that we do still need to modify with respect to this particular character. If you look at this last block here, there's something that is a bit of a confusion point, if you will. When it says your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability check you make that uses either of those skills, it's referring to the 2 that you're going to choose from this list of 4 that you're then going to set as double proficient. In my case, I need to ensure that I enable double proficiency on the nature and religion skills. And that's because these are the 2 skills that we selected when we were creating our character, and the selection screen for this feature popped up. To set double proficiency, all I have to do is ensure that I click on this star once for each of these particular skills. And just ignore the fact that these bonuses are up as high as they are. I actually realized that I made a mistake earlier when I was recording this, and I'm just correcting that now. To confirm that double proficiency is there, you should have 2 stars, and if you hover over it, you will get double proficiency bonus listed in the tooltip that pops up. At Cleric level 2, your character is going to gain the Channel Divinity feature through the base class, but it will also gain a second feature that is in turn also linked to the Channel Divinity feature, and that's this Knowledge of the Ages here. So let's go ahead and first level our character up. I'm just simply going to use the character wizard to handle this. Make sure I select a spell here. There we go. And then commit this change. I am then going to go ahead and set up our Channel Divinity feature. First, I'm going to pop this open so that we have this accessible. I am also going to pop this open so that we have this for reference. What I want to do is, because Channel Divinity shares its uses between all 3 of these Channel Divinity features that we're going to eventually gain for our character, I want to ensure that I have an appropriate power group set up that, quote unquote, shares those uses within our action sheet. If you watched the base class video, you will know that I created a new power group that was specific to Channel Divinity, and that's what I'm going to do here again. I'm going to clean that out of the way for the time being. I then popped this open and made some adjustments. 1, I left it as an ability group. 2, I linked it against our Wisdom ability score. And 3, I modified this to be a 1 rest entry. And that gives us this little pip that we see next to Turn Undead. Now that that is set up, I'm going to go ahead and go over Knowledge of the Ages first, and then we're going to go through and set it up. This feature allows your character to become proficient in a specific skill or tool for a period of 10 minutes. And just like the Turn Undead option for Channel Divinity, this is going to make use of an action when you go ahead and use this feature. But unlike Turn Undead, it has a duration that applies to your character, not those of the undead creatures. Unfortunately, this isn't going to give us an effect that we can make use of to temporarily enhance one of our skills. But it does have a usage limitation as well as a duration that can be applied to our character. As a result, we need to do one thing. We need to ensure that we drag and drop this onto our character's action sheet. Make sure that we move that power group into place, and you'll notice that there is nothing here to indicate that there's an effect of any kind. This means that we're going to have to go ahead and create something called a tracker effect, and it's an effect that we are going to use so that we know exactly when this particular feature is going to drop from our character. Thus, we then know when we need to remove that temporary proficiency we gave ourselves from one of these particular skills. To do that, I'm just simply going to right-click on this particular feature, add an effect, and the effect is literally just going to be called Knowledge of the Ages. I am then going to ensure that I set a 10-minute duration and that it's only ever going to be something we can apply to our own character. There's nothing else that we're going to add here. The last thing I want to do is just simply clean up this title. Oops, there we go. And because we have the power group called Channel Divinity, we don't need the title entry here, and this gives us a clean indication as to which feature that we're going to use. The way that this feature is going to work is as follows. When it's your character's turn, because this can't be used as anything other than an action here, you would go ahead and apply this effect to your character when you're telling the Dungeon Master that you're going to make use of this feature. You're then going to tick this off, and you can see here that the Turn Undead feature also has an indicator that it has been used. This is that linking capability that I was telling you about. When you use one, it's going to indicate that the other is also used because the number of uses is controlled by this here, meaning it's going to have one use that is shared across all of the abilities and features that are linked into this particular power group. Next, you're going to have to go to the Skills tab if you're choosing a skill that you're going to become proficient in, and simply tick the star next to it. You are going to have to remember and track which particular proficiency you selected if you decided to go with a skill. And that's because when this duration ends, you have to remove that proficiency. And you do that again by simply ticking on the star here a couple of times. I think it's 3 total is the number of clicks you have to do before it returns to normal. And how I recommend that you track it, because it'll be nice and simple, is that you have the Dungeon Master modify the title of this effect. You yourself can't do it once it has been added to your character. You can only do it here in this particular portion of the information sheet. And it would be rather dumb for you to go through and remove this and then add this effect with a slight modification made to it. All the Dungeon Master has to do is simply open up the effect here and simply add in, say in brackets, perception, with respect to the title of the effect here. And you can see that on your sheet, it is also updated. And it doesn't matter whether it's a skill proficiency or whether it's a tool proficiency that is added to this particular entry. Beyond that, that's how this feature works. And as long as you remember that these are linked and that you have to complete a short or long rest in order to be able to regain any ability to use any Channel Divinity feature, you should be good to go. At Cleric level 3, your character is going to gain their next set of domain spells. And in this case, it's the Augury and Suggestion spells that we see here in this list. I'm going to go ahead and level our character up in order to show how this is going to work. Once I gain my level here, I'm going to go ahead and select my spells, and in this case I have access now to level 2 spells, so I'm just going to simply select one from there. Before I leave this, you'll notice that none of the spells that we're gaining through our feature here are listed in this particular spell selection, even though they're level 2 spells. You won't be able to select your domain spells through this list, and you're not going to gain them whenever you commit this change in order to go through and complete the changes you made to your character. Instead, what you have to do is open this up and then drag and drop your skills into place, or your spells into place. And you're going to want to do that by dropping it onto the knowledge domain spell listing or power group that you've already created. Because when you do that, it's going to create a linked power group that is also called knowledge domain spells, but indicates now that it is for level 2 spells. I'm going to go ahead and drop both of these into place, and it doesn't matter whether you drop them both into this level 1, they're all going to link against this particular power group here, spell group here. Now, I say linked. What do I mean by that? When I pop this particular power group open, you will see that it's already got the ability of Wisdom selected. If I change this, close this out, pop open the level 1 power group, you will see that it is also now specifically set up as Charisma. I'm going to reset that back to Wisdom. And that's what I mean by a group. If I go ahead and set Charisma here again, open up our normal spells group, you will see that it is still set to Wisdom. And that's because this set of groups here is completely different. It's not linked to this group, but any spell that is added to our character sheet is going to get linked to this particular spell group because these two groups are linked to each other and these two groups are linked to each other. I'm going to set this back to Wisdom once again. It'll save you time and effort that you don't have to worry about anytime you add any of these new spells to your list here. So you can see with a little bit of prep work in advance, we've now simplified the process of gaining our domain spells. At Cleric level 5, your character is going to once again gain another set of domain spells. And it's in this case, the non-detection and speak with dead spells. And it's the same process as before. You simply go ahead, level up your character. I already had done level 4 off screen, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm going to now choose a level 3 spell here. Mass Healing Word Works. Commit that. And then I'm simply going to go ahead and drag these two spells into the level 1 or level 2. It doesn't matter. It's going to always create the appropriate group to match. And drag that into place. Oops, I actually needed Speak with Dead, not non-detection. Delete this duplicate. There we go. And that's it. We're done. It doesn't take much effort once you've got this set up this way to add in your new domain spells. At Cleric level 6, your character is going to gain another Channel Divinity feature called Read Thoughts. And this is going to link into the same power group that we created for the other two Channel Divinity features. So I'm going to go ahead and level our character up first so that we can prepare how that's going to function. There we go. With this now created, I can drag and drop this into this particular power group, although it's not actually going to link it. Simply update that, get rid of this, and now we have that Read Thoughts capability there. Pop this open so that it links to the correct wisdom-based saving throw. And that is pretty much everything you have to do when it comes to linking this into place. Before I move on, I'm going to want to update the power group at this point to indicate that it now has the ability to be cast twice. Now, what this feature actually does is that you get to choose a creature who is within 60 feet of your character and is visible to them. They don't have to hear them, but they must be visible. That creature will be forced to roll a wisdom-based saving throw in order to prevent your character from being able to gain access to their thoughts. If they fail that saving throw, your character is going to be able to read the creature's foremost thoughts about what they're actively thinking and feeling, giving you some insight as to what they might be considering doing. Examples could be that you could pick up that the creature's considering fleeing, or that the creature's considering a specific kind of attack. You might be able to detect that they're frightened, or in some way, shape, or form fearful of the situation, but not in a way that they have an effect applied to them. The effect itself is going to last for 60 seconds, but in order for your character to read their thoughts, they must be within 60 feet of that particular creature and still be able to see them. The effect itself does not go away when they leave that 60-foot reach. Instead, you just simply can't read their thoughts. If they are still under the effects of the feature and you choose to end the feature as an action, your character will be able to cast the suggestion spell on that target without expending a spell slot, and they are going to automatically fail the saving throw against that spell. However, if the creature has succeeded on their saving throw, then your character is going to be unable to use this feature again against that same creature until your character has completed a long rest. So the question is, how does this actually get used? What you would do is, on your turn, you would force a particular creature to make a saving throw. So I'm going to use Skeleton 8 as the example here. Hopefully they fail this time. If they have, technically you can now read their thoughts. Now, there's no effect here, so there's no indication that that factor is there. So this is something we're going to want to add. So let's go ahead and just simply quickly add a effect here. Modify this, and I'm going to call it read thoughts. And I'm going to set up a duration of 60 seconds. Wait, it's 1 minute. I keep forgetting that that is a minute indicator, not a seconds indicator. And it's going to be on a target, and it isn't going to expend. So now that we have this, we can drag this effect indicator onto this particular target. And then what you will want to then do is link this back to your character so that the Dungeon Master knows who is reading the skeleton's thoughts. And as long as that creature remains within 60 feet of your character, and as a Dungeon Master, I'm also going to rule that you need to be able to see them in order to maintain that connection. You will be able to continue to read that thoughts until that duration itself has expired. And you can see here that there's a duration of 10 turns. You also will then need to ensure that you tick off the fact that you use this feature. And as you can see, we still have 1 use left now that we're level 6. With respect to the suggestion spell, the way that this is going to work is, let's say you choose to remove this particular feature. At that point, you get to drop the suggestion effects onto this creature. How do you do that? Well, the easiest way to do this is to ensure that you add this to your character sheet. And it is a Cleric knowledge domain based spell. At this particular point in time, we should technically already have it. And we do. It's here at level 2. So the effects are already there. What you then get to do is simply drag and drop this into place to ensure that suggestion itself is applied. Remove that, and you don't need to tick a spell slot here because you get to do this without having to actually execute a spell slot. At this point, the creature has to do whatever the suggestion was, as long as it is something that is within the bounds of what suggestion will allow that creature to do. And in case you have never seen what a C indicator means, this is implicit in that your character has to concentrate in order to maintain that connection. It will last for a total of 8 hours. That's what the duration is going to be. For the duration of that 8-hour period, you are going to have to concentrate. If your character takes damage within that 8-hour period, there's a chance that this is going to disrupt your concentration of that particular spell. Now I'm going to demonstrate this using the Dungeon Master's combat tracker again. I've already advanced the turn to the Shadow Daemon. I'm going to make an attack roll on our Cleric, and if there is a hit, which in this case there is, as soon as I roll damage, that should trigger a concentration check. And you can see that that extra dice roll was concentration. It's when your character takes damage, that's when the concentration check is going to get rolled. If you avoid damage through some other means, then this concentration check will never be triggered. Now, in this particular case, we succeeded on that concentration check, so we don't have to worry. If this falls off, then the skeleton will eventually recover their senses, if you will, and probably once again begin attacking. Cleric level 7 is once again going to be a fairly easy level to deal with because we are gaining additional domain spells. In this case, we're gaining Arcane Eye and Confusion. Let me go ahead and level our character up to deal with this. There we go. And then I'm simply going to take these spells, minimize most of these features until I gain access, or power groups I should say, until I gain access to one of our knowledge domain spell groups. And then I'm simply going to drag and drop these into place in order to be able to create the next group. And there we go. Now we have both of these spells applied. At Cleric level 8, your character is going to gain access to their next feature called Potent Spellcasting. What this feature does is modify your cantrips, specifically any that do damage, so that they can add your character's wisdom modifier to those damage rolls for those cantrips. Now, before I go through and set that up, I'm going to make sure that we have our character appropriately leveled. Now, I do gain an ability score improvement here. I'm not going to worry about showing too much here on screen, simply because I want to get onto that feature, and I've already covered that in the base class. There we go. Of all of the cantrips that our character has, and yes, I do know that I'm missing some cantrips at this point. Again, those are covered in the base class, and I'm not dealing with those here. Only one of our cantrips actually does damage. As we can see here, it does 1d8 of radiant damage. There are two ways that we can go through and modify this. We could theoretically drag this into our action sheet and then create an effect that adds our wisdom modifier every time we go ahead and cast a particular cantrip, but there's a catch. There's no way for Fantasy Grounds to automatically know that we're casting a cantrip. What that means is that there is a chance you could theoretically forget to add that bonus when you execute damage through your cantrips. A far simpler approach is simply to modify the damage effect associated with the cantrip in question. In this case, this would be this 1d8 radiant damage. I'm simply going to pop this open using this magnifying glass, and then make sure that I select Wisdom here as our stat. As we can see, we now have a +5 radiant bonus here. What this means is that anytime our character now rolls this particular damage on a particular target, that target is going to receive an additional 5 points of damage in addition to the d8 roll. In this case, we did 12 points of damage, so we rolled a 7. And this will apply to any cantrip that you have here that does damage. It doesn't matter what the type of damage is, all it has to do is damage. At character level 9, your character is going to receive their last domain spells. In this case, it's going to be Legend Lore and Scrying. I'm going to quickly go ahead and level up our character. Make sure I choose a spell. I don't want Legend Lore. This is one of the few spells that is actually a clerical spell. Oh, apparently so is Scrying. So we want to avoid those two. I'm going to go with this one. Now, that might mean that we have to make an adjustment to these spells to prepare them because they're, by native capabilities, a clerical spell. I'm going to go ahead, pop this open, and drop these into place. And excellent, we don't have to worry about that. They are already prepared. From this moment on, this particular feature is not going to give us anything else. We've already gotten everything we're going to get out of it. So we don't have to worry about dealing with any additional domain spells. And that's primarily because they only go up to level 5 anyway. While your character itself can still receive level 9 clerical spells, up to level 9 clerical spells, when it comes to the domain spells, that's not possible. When it comes to the last feature that your character is going to receive through the domain, you're going to go through a long level dry period because it's not going to be something you get until level 17. And that is going to be a clerical level requirement in order for you to gain this feature. If you have multi-classed in some way, shape, or form, and thus can't actually achieve cleric level 17, you won't gain this feature. What it does, though, is it gives your character the means to see shadowy glimpses of events that have recently occurred in a given area or are associated with a given object. But your character is going to require a meditation period of 1 minute prior to them being able to maintain a dreamlike state in order to actually see those things. Once the initial 1 minute period of meditation is complete, your character will be able to maintain that meditative state for a period of minutes equal to your character's wisdom modifier. So if a bonus of +5 is applicable to your character, which it is in our case, for example, then that means that our character would meditate for a total of 5 minutes where we're in a dreamlike state, but the total amount of time of meditation is actually 6 minutes. The first minute is going to be spent getting into the right frame of mind, while the remaining 5 minutes would be where you're viewing the auras that would be associated with either the events in that area or associated with the object in question. When you use this feature against an object, it's going to provide specific information associated with that object. But if you're using it to study the events of a room, then what you're going to see is kind of like a dreamlike viewing of what took place in that room for a period of 5 minutes. Of course, that assumes that your wisdom modifier at this point is +5. If it's not, and your wisdom modifier is only a +2, then you're going to be limited to a 2-minute duration in your viewing. I highly recommend that you read over these two description blocks to determine what you're going to get when you're reading an object versus what you're going to get when you're reading a room, so that when you are ready to make use of this particular feature, you have a good idea in mind as to what you're going to be looking for. In either event, once this feature is used, your character is going to be required to complete a short or a long rest before they will be able to use it again. So I'm going to go ahead and level our character up, make sure that we have the ability to make use of this feature. I'm going to choose a level 9 spell. Let's go with this, deal with that. And then I'm going to add this, unless it's already been added for us. No, it has not. I'm going to go ahead and add this here. I'm going to move this into this group because this is where it actually technically should be. And I'm going to delete this because we've already moved that up there. I totally did not realize that was there, but anyway. And in this particular case, the reason why we're adding it to this sheet here is because we need to track it. it's got a limitation on the number of uses. In this case, it is one rest, meaning that we can complete a short or a long rest in order to be able to use this feature. That is the only reason why we are adding it to the action sheet. As this is more of a role-playing aspect to this particular class, it's not really something that I personally can explain how to use it, because that's going to be unique to each Dungeon Master that you're running a game with. Every Dungeon Master is going to have their own way that they're going to deal with this particular feature. So as a result, there may be some variation and differences that you might have to deal with respect to that. A basic order of operations, though, would be that you enter a room, you tell the Dungeon Master that you're going to use visions of the past, and hopefully they've got something prepared or something descriptive enough to be able to explain what you see in that room that they consider relevant to the campaign in question. The Domain of Knowledge class specialization is really good with respect to mystery or fact-finding related campaigns, as it allows the cleric to be geared in a way to really help out a party and not miss any clues or misinterpret any information, because they're extremely wise in relation to this particular kind of search concept, if you will. A cleric might not necessarily have the intelligence to be able to understand how that information links together, but they'll at least be able to understand the concepts associated with the information. And at later levels, the means to gain visibility into someone's thoughts and even see the past of specific objects or even events that occurred within a room is a huge advantage to any party who's going through one of those kinds of campaigns. However, this does bring us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I want to thank you for watching this video, and if you found the information useful, click on that like button as well as leave a comment below, as it helps the channel gain exposure. Also, consider subscribing, as I release content similar to this topic quite regularly on the channel.